or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Harriet Gromer Hicks, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 12, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our first article is Inside Culture, a little too close for comfort. A retail worker forms a creepy parasocial attachment with a pop star, and an unnerving, lurky, and marketing executive attaches himself to a neighbor in the cringe comedy Friendship. This diabolical performances and more are on HBO Max. The Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice, 1952, produced during his creative peak when the mood of post-war Japan complicated domestic life. Yashiro Uzo's The Flavor of Green Tea Over Rice is a multi-layered reflection on marriage that unfolds in both intimate spaces and in bustling Tokyo locations like the ballpark and pachinko parlor. Shin Subri and Machiyo Kuguru star as a childless couple whose backgrounds and personalities have always made them an awkward fit. As their partnership is thrown into crisis, their niece Kiko-chan starts to question the tradition of arranged marriages. Vincent Canby appreciated the wider canvas of the film, which he said looks as much like a social history as it does like a zoo work. Lurker 2025. The parasocial attachment between fans and pop stars has been a phenomenon since long before Beatlemania, but the unnerving indie thriller Lurker explores the particular dangers of this relationship in the age of social media. In a truly diabolical lead performance, Theodore Perlern stars as a retail worker who integrates himself to an ultra-hip musician, Archie Madekwe, and becomes part of the psychophonic entourage that follows the artist around the concert dates, video shots, and hangout sessions. Pellerin's creepy performance suggests a TikTok Tom Ripley, a mimic whose singular obsession takes ever darker turns. A Complete Unknown, 2024. While it by no means avoids all the common pitfalls of musician biops, A Complete Unknown from the Walk the Line director James Mangold dodges an important one by limiting its treatment of Bob Dylan to the early part of his career, beginning with Pilgrimage to Meet His Ailing Idol Woody Guthrie in 1961 New York City, and ending with his notorious plug performance at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965. The film tracks Dylan Timothy Chalamet as he becomes a musical sensation while carefully cultivating an image that's both alluring and impenetrable. Manohla Dargis admired it for not trying to make Bob palatable, nice, or finally comprehensible in the usual dreary biopic fashion. Friendship, 2024. Nothing about Tim Robinson's strange, awkward, abrasive compartment as a sketch comedian and indie artist, or I Think You Should Leave, suggests a movie star in the making. So writer-director Andrew D. Young has tailored his debut comedy specifically to Robinson's strengths through not for all tastes. Friendship is hilarious for those on its wavelength, with Robinson playing a marketing executive and family man who attaches himself to a new neighbor, Paul Rudd. His inability to play it cool under any circumstances leads to sublime heights of cringe comedy. The Blair Witch Project, 1999. How did a low-budget independent horror film in which most of the shocks come from rock and stick formations electrify Sundance and make over $100 million in American theaters? The simple answer lies in how effectively the Blair Witch Project, in its methods and its market, teases the imagination, confronting viewers with the found footage conceit of filmmakers who vanish in haunted Maryland forests and coaxing them into nightmare. An entire horror submerge would follow, but few films have approached its slow burn, tension, or its inedible images of characters snagged in supernatural web. Janet Mausland called it skillfully spun out in thin air. Ratchet, 2000. Before moving on to films like the cult favorite Morven Collar and the recent Jennifer Lawrence drama Die My Love, the Scottish director Lynne Ramsay brought her impressionistic style to bear on Ratchet, a debut feature that defies the conventions of kitchen sink realism. Set in Glasgow apartment block during garbage strike in the early 70s, the film follows on unstructured days of 12-year-old boy, William Eddy, whose lyrical dreams of family moving to the country are checked by poverty and danger of his daily life. While Ramsay doesn't flinch from the bleak parameters of her young hero's world, she taps into this tapestry for mischief and imagination. Elvis Mitchell called it a gorgeous blend of beauty and squalor. The Cube. I'm a culture editor at the Times and an enthusiastic consumer of art in most forms. Podcasts are my blind spot. Here are 5 I've been watching, reading, and listening to. The Initiative film. Come for my provocative plot in Olivia Wilde's sex comedy Chamber Piece. 2 San Francisco couples circling each other like coyotes at a wine and cheese evening and stay for the delight performances by Wilde, Seth Rogen, Ed Norton, and especially Penelope Cruz, who does more with the word flan than you think one syllable could hold. My Summer of Love film. I'm a big fan of the Polish filmmaker Paweł Pawlikowski, Ida Cold War, and very excited to his next movie, Fatherland, which won him the Best Director prize at Cannes. In the meantime, I'm revisiting the 2004 English language gem, a sly and gorgeous coming-of-age drama. Bonus, one of its stars is Emily Blunt in her first movie. Fixer KO book. Give me a nifty New York social satire in or around payphone era and I'm all in. Han Ang's charmingly berserk 2001 cult novel, which is being reissued this month, follows a former Filipino rent boy who agrees to pose as a feng shui expert, recording the armchairs and emotional insecurities of Manhattan's gullible uptown elite. Ritz Ortolani 100 album. The Italian maestro of movie soundtracks scored more than 200 films in his lifetime, mostly art house stuff, horror and spaghetti westerns. This complication of vibey, clattering soundscapes is one of any go-tos for workday headphone music. His main theme for 1985 Cannibal Holocaust is I Swear a Beauty. The Highline Art. After many years in Brooklyn, I recently moved to West Chelsea, and I'm now officially the girl who just discovered the High Line. Bluebells, the Bahamian Buddha, the luxury condo voyeurism. Recently, I wandered over to the Shed to see Doug Atkins' California Dreamville installation, Nightscape, with a live vocal accompaniment by the LA Master Carol. Our next article, Catherine Lazagos sets sail, sort of. Catherine Legea believed she'd landed a ticket to paradise when she was cast in live-action Mona as Polynesian Disney princess. Then she discovered she was going to Atlanta. I was like, we're shooting this beautiful island movie, and we can't shoot it in L.A. We can't shoot in Hawaii. During shooting, Lagana, 19, was in a boat on a water tank, sometimes with Dwayne Johnson, who plays the Demogod Maui, with blue screen to look at. The Australian actress was raised in Sydney, where her father, Jay, is an actor of Samoan descent, and some of her 7 siblings are in musical theater. She recently finished Crash Out, a teenage horror thriller. In video call, Lagana spoke of reminders of home. These are called edited excerpts. Number 1, my Panumu necklaces. I have 3 right now. I have one that's kind of a hook, which I've worn for 3 years. I got it right before I went into Moana as a gift from my auntie and uncle. They gave it to me as kind of a blessing and an item I could take with me for protection. It's a rite of passage in a lot of families, and especially mine. Number 2, ice water. I have an obsession with ice water. I will not drink water if it doesn't have ice in it. My preference is got to be more ice than water, and that ice starts melting, you've got to add more ice. Number 3, having my siblings together. One of my favorite parts of growing up was having so many siblings. It just makes it so much nicer when we all get together now that we're all a bit older and a bit more spread out in the world. Number 4, the stage. My absolute dream would be to work on the West End Broadway, the National Theatre in London, but I feel like I need to build my skills in movies and TV first. I look at what Sadie Sink has done. John Proctor is the villain, hasn't come to Australia yet, but I'm putting my name down for it if it does. Number 5, a good curly hair day. That is a make or break for me. My hair has gotten a lot of curlier as I've gotten older, and if it's bad curly hair day, I just can't function. It'll be up, and then it'll be out, and then I'll beat it, and then I'd undo it, and I'll put it in a bun. Number 6, Brittany Broski and Caleb Herion on the comment section with Drew Alfoso. Possibly the funniest podcast episode to history. When you're in hair and makeup, it takes 2 and a bit hours to get the wig on, get the makeup done. I would just watch it, replay it, watch it, replay it. The 3 of them together are geniuses. Number 7, walking. I'm a big walker. Is it because I don't have my license and can't drive? Maybe, but I would like to say that I'm just really passionate for fitness. Number 8, my girls. My girls are my 3 best friends, Carmen, Stella, and Asia, and I have been with these girls since I'd say year 7, year 8. We're each other's ride or dies. These will be my bridesmaids at my wedding. These girls will come with me absolutely wherever I go, everywhere I go. Number 9, Moana, the 2016 animated movie. That movie changed my life in so many different ways, giving me a lot of inspiration when I was younger. Getting a Disney princess who's from your culture, it's a way of special thing to be celebrated in that way. Number 10, everyday pasta. I don't want a nice dinner pasta. I like the ready-made pasta you get out of the packet, and then some kind of roasted vegetable sauce and just copious amounts of Parmesan cheese. It's my peak comfort food. You are listening to reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in dance. Forward movements in featherless and paint. Across generations, Lei Hong Chung and Shen Wei are grappling with the possibilities of Chinese contemporary dance. The striped feather extends straight up from the dancer's head, nearly doubling her height. As she moves, it moves in response, bending like a reed in the wind, rippling like an eel. In Chinese opera, pheasant tail feathers called lingzi and usually worn in pairs identify a warrior character. The plumes aren't just decorative, their waving and quivering express mood and emotion. But in Birdie by the Taiwanese contemporary dance company Hung Dance, the feathers take on more functions. Performers use them like quills, writing on the stage and in the air, or turn them into weapons. Clusters fly like arrows, showering in volleys. Such extensions of Chinese tradition are the fruit of a search for a new form of Lei Hong Chung, Hung Dance's artistic director. I wanted to find a vocabulary that was Taiwanese but also mine, he said in an interview. Speak it in Mandarin Chinese through a translator. His choreography also draws on the breath and flow of Tai Chi. Yet the sources for Birdie, which will have its New York premiere in NYU Skirt Ball on Friday and Saturday, aren't solely Taiwanese. Lei started as a street dancer, and his work incorporates the American-born street style of popping. He said he was also inspired by the dark and grotesque vision of British painter Francis Bacon and named a MacArthur Fellow. He choreographed the opening ceremony for the 200 Beijing Olympics. Mindscape is the first work he has made for the company since folding. To create the piece, Shen moved for a few months to Ganguenzhou, the capital of Guangdong province, and found himself in the rooms where he had been a student nearly 40 years. Full circle is a reductive way to put it, but I think it's apt, said Zach Ryan Shigal, the rehearsal director for Shen's company. I don't speak Mandarin, but it sometimes felt like I did, because there was this way the idea would bleed through the language, Shigal added, noting that Shen alternated between Mandarin and English by choreographing Mindscape. The process really started to reflect this boundless vision that he has. I felt like a teenager again, Shen said in a phone interview from his Paris home. Being in that place brought back memories of the beginning, when he was taking a risk by committing to an untested idea and had no idea how it might turn out. Since the current Guangdong dancers are the age Shen was when he started out, he saw himself in them. They are also unsure of the future, he said, and they are questioning everything like I did, but unlike the young Shen, this generation has a role model proof that a career is possible now. Alan Parker's film Birdie 1984, in which Matthew Modine plays a Vietnam War veteran, also imagines he is a bird. In this way, Lei, who founded his company in 2017, joins a line of artists who have tried to blend Chinese culture, contemporary dance, and other Western influence. In Taiwan, the most prominent example of Lin Hui Min, whose Cloud Gate Dance Theater and East Meets West choreography, mixing Tai Chi and Martha Graham, have been celebrated at home and abroad for decades. Some mainland Chinese artists have followed a similar path, including Shen Weihu, made his name on international scene in the 1990s. When Birdie is in New York, Shen will be presenting the U.S. premiere of his Mindscape at the American Dance Festival in Durham, North Carolina. The next week, from July 22nd to 25th, Mindscape comes to New York in a free outdoor performance as part of Lincoln Center's Chinese Arts Week and the Dance Encounter series. That means that New York audience can experience both the signature work of choreographer recently characterized by Lin Hui Min as the next big thing in Taiwanese dance, and the latest piece by renowned predecessor. How do these representatives of different generations grapple with the contradictions of possibilities of Chinese contemporary dance? In Mindscape, Shen mingles dancers from his New York company, Shen Wei Dance Arts, with members of Guangdong Modern Dance Company. Officially formed in 1992, the Guangdong troupe was the hard-won result of an experiment by the American Dance Festival to foster modern dance in China. When it was proposed, some American observers doubted whether such an individualist form could take root in a collectivist society. Observers in China expressed suspicion of it as too Western and bourgeois, too free with bodies. But the cross-cultural experiment worked. Shen, a founding member of the Guangdong Company, choreographed its first international hit, Folding, in 1999, but then his career rocketed. A year after he was coming up in Taiwan, in the 2010 Hung Dances, Lei also had a model, Lin Hui Min. That didn't mean progress was smooth. Resources are still limited and difficult to access, Lei said. Facing setbacks and rejections at home, he refocused his efforts on gaining invitation to international festivals and theaters. Only after he started winning awards abroad did opportunities open for him in Taiwan. Birdie, which has become his calling card, had its U.S. debut at the American Dance Festival in 2024. To give younger choreographers an easier road, Lei recently founded the Stray Birds Dance Platform, which provides more easily attained support for fledgling artists. Some of his struggles also found expression in Birdie, which he called a kind of self-portrait. Several times in the work, dancer tries to break free from group. The group traps the individual, imprisons her, manipulates her body as if she were their puppet. The struggle for space and freedom is hard and often lonely. Lay said, Shen, at a later stage in his career, is more sanguine, and so is Mindscape, a professional painter as well as choreographer. He has long incorporated the act of painting into his dance works, having his pigmented, dubbed performers leave traces on the floor of their swirling motion. Mindscape continues that multimedia practice with its rainbow of colors and poems he has written about the landscape of the soul. Thinking back on my struggles of the past 30 years, I have been realizing the importance of inner support, he said. As you get older, you start to think more philosophically. Ancient Chinese scholars talk about being flexible like bamboo, not accepting but adapting. Even for a well-established choreographer, touring with an international company can be tricky. With flexibility in mind, Shen designed Mindscape. In several versions of full-scale theatrical production with live music and projections of the dancers seen from above. Busby Berkeley style, a version with recorded music and half-size variant suitable for outdoor spaces, losing the video but keeping the body painting. That abridged version is coming to New York. The world premiere of Mindscape, though, was at its most spectacular at the Kalamazoo Opera House, a grand glass and steel structure designed by Zaha Hadid that opened in 2010. When Sheen's company toured Chinese cities last year, it performed only in opera houses. It's shocking how popular modern dance is in China now, he said. Zhigo, who performed in the debut, recalled contrasting the enthusiasm of the Chinese audience at the Opera House with Shen's stories of how foreign modern dance was in the country when the Gangsung Company started. He recounted how, at the end of Mindscape, Premier Shen cut up the painting his dancers had made and distributed the pieces to viewers. It felt like barrier had dissolved, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in classical. A celebrity composer broadens his horizon. Joe Hisaishi became famous writing soundtracks. Now he's focusing on his first love, Chicago. Joe Hisaishi had spent the evening leading the Chicago Symphony Orchestra from the conductor's podium. But near the end of the concert, a grand piano was wheeled out on stage, and he took a seat on the bench. He started to play his series of rolled chords, and auditorium rattled with cheers. His fans immediately recognized the opening of the soundtrack for Spirited Away, 2001, one of his many beloved collaborations with the filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki of Studio Ghibli. This excitement, the kind that makes people squeal at pop concerts when they hear the first notes of a favorite song, tends to follow Hisaishi wherever he performs. Usually those cheers are followed by rapt, reverential silence. At the 2,500-seat Symphony Center in Chicago, a quiet crowd is impressive. At an arena like Madison Square Garden, where he can attract thousands more to an orchestral concert of all things, it's astounding. That is the rare power of Hisaishi 75, has as a composer and conductor. A celebrity because of his chameleonic and enchanting soundtracks, he has long maintained parallel life as a classical music artist. Now that is where he is shifting his focus. He has started writing for concerts more than film, recording for Deutsche Grammophon and appearing with some of the world's great orchestras, and having already filled Radio City Music Hall and Madison Square Garden. He returned to New York this past week at a hallowed venue for classical musicians, Carnegie Hall. I want to find new ways to draw a broader audience to classical music, Hashini said in an interview. And if in the process that also broadens my own horizons as a musician, then I think that would be wonderful. Hashishi, born after World War II, came of age when Japanese musicians were inhaling Western culture and transforming it into new fusion genres like city pop. His mother tongue is minimalism of Philip Glass and Steve Reich, but his scores are much more electric, even disorienting. The soundtrack of Kiki's Delivery Service, 1989, for example, opens with a waltz that is later given the street sound of an accordion and mandolin, but also lushness of symphony orchestra. As it continues, there is an effervescent tune fit for children's television, honky-tonk piano, and a melody that moves seems to contain elements of Madama Butterfly, Snow White, and professionally based on Japanese kanji and phonic equivalents to Quincy Jones. Through all this exposure and study, a personal style emerged. Rather than simply limiting genres, super focusing, Hashishi said, I am absorbing the philosophies of techniques and experimental spirit inherent in each form of music and aim to integrate them into my own artistic expression. His early album, MKWAGA, from 1981, in minimalism by way of pop, like Glass's songs from Liquid Days. 5 years later, it opens with repetitive figures and vibraphone that, joined by electronics, take on a grooving trance. It's sensibly he carried into the soundtrack of Nashiki of Valley of the Wind, 1984, his first movie with Masaki. Hashishi had originally been brought on to compose the film's image album, a kind of preparatory job. Makisi was so taken with it that he hired Hashishi for the final soundtrack. They have stuck together ever since, though Hashishi has said that their relationship is above all professional, likening the collaborations to elections, something that reliably happened every several years. Mereki retired not for the first time with his most recent film, The Boy and the Heron from 2023. In Miyake's anthology, Starting Point and Turning Point, he describes his work with Hashishi as more of an exchange than a side-by-side partnership. For each film, the director would send the composer a memo or collection of poems to give sense of mood and character, trusting that Hashishi would return with the right sound for My Neighbor Totoro, 1988. Masaki knew that the introduction to the title creature shouldn't be too mystical or even endearing. That's why Hashishi-san's minimalist music was best, Maksiki wrote, if it were more mysterious, then it would be supernatural. What I thought was perfect was that he includes sounds we've heard somewhere and recognize, but still gives us the feeling of something is a bit different. The same could be said of every Hashishi soundtrack. Though each is also a singular creation, he liberally adopts styles and forms from around the world and from deep in music history, with reference abounding the martial symphonies of Shushkevich in Princess Monique, 1997, Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries in Ponyo, 2008, John Adams' Thumping Pulses in The Wind Rises, 2013. They are musical analog, Mizuki's aesthetic in movies like Kiki's Delivery Service and Howl's Moving Castle, 2004, whose vaguely European architecture and fashion are comfortably familiar yet unplacable. Hashishi's film music is predominantly charming and incredibly memorable, in part because he approaches composition horizontally rather than vertically. Through a line of melody more than stacked harmonies, this leads to soundtracks that behave almost like counterpoint, flowing alongside the film instead of strictly underscoring it with illustrative effects and emotional guideposts. When I create a single melody, the question becomes how it can move naturally and how I can write it so it truly comes alive. Much like the laws of nature, Hashishi said, I always try to make my music as natural as possible, allowing it to unfold naturally, creating something that anyone can embrace. It certainly is embraced. Esteban Battalion, the Chicago Symphony's principal trumpet, who has played the solo in a piece adapted from the Rival in Castle in the Sky, 1986, said that anyone who listens to Hashishi melody gets touched by it immediately. Ryan Fleur, the president and chief executive of Philadelphia Orchestra, where Hashishi is composer in residence, said that when Hashishi encored with his studio Ghibli music, audience members had tears running down their cheek. Even Hashishi is affected by it. The first modern pop ballads all at once. This is music with feet in many sound worlds cohering into disarmingly winsome and distinctive whole. Hashishi makes it look easy, but few composers are compatible of such confident freedom, and few have a cosmopolitan background as so poised for it. Not just globally famous, Hashishi is one of the most truly global composers. As a student schooled in Suzuki violin method and piano, Hashishi had his head in the classic, but also music by living composers like Shostakovich and Pierre Boulez. He came across Terry Riley's album, A Rainbow in Curved Air, which inspired a transformative plunge into minimalism, and he had a love of jazz pronounced that he abandoned his birth name, Mamoru Fujii, to go by Joe Hashishi. Audience for my music is myself, he said. It doesn't move or excite me, then it simply isn't good enough. Hashishi has become popular. He is capable of selling out arenas for multiple days, straight with concerts of symphonic suitors adapted from studio Jihibi soundtracks. With a lot of merchandise for sale and a little sentimentality on stage, there isn't an element of classical crossover to these performances. And if they were the only thing on the calendar, he would risk becoming a Yanni or an Andres Rieu. But he has always maintained a more traditional career as a classical music conductor in Japan. Fans looking to his soundtracks online may have also encountered his vigorous and clean interpretations symphonies by Beethoven, Brahms, and Schubert, or its compilations of contemporary, mostly minimalist music. As a composer, I choose minimalist approach, Hisaishi said. But though that experience, when I look back at the classical repertoire, I began to think that there might be approaches no one had tried before, and that classical music might evolve in new ways. That was what led me to begin conducting. The challenge has been to spread Hisaishi's musical reputation and engagements beyond Japan. He emerged from the coronavirus pandemic lockdown with the Studio Ghibli Arena tour, but along the way picked up a new management from the Blue Chip office, Harrison Parat, which has led to appointments in Philadelphia, Paris, and elsewhere. He has also been signed by the prestigious music publisher Bosie and Hawkes and is at work on an opera. He'd been doing these arena tours for multiple years, and it wasn't really what he was looking for, said Moama Parat, the management firm's chief executive. He felt he was straying from his path, so this has been how do we reposition him to pivot away from the perception of him as a film composer and get people to see what his real passion is. This is really his golden era. In his appearances as a conductor, Hisaishi often programs his music with pieces that may be less familiar to his fans, like Reich's Desert Music with the Orchestra of St. Luke's at Carnegie Hall this weekend. He paired his recent concerto for orchestra and Glass's First Symphony with Boston Symphony Orchestra at Tanglewood this coming weekend. His music will be bookend Ravel's Piano Concerto in G with Jean Ives Thabet. Concerts like those usually sell out with visibly younger audiences. In Philadelphia, Fleur said 75% of attendees had never been to the hall or heard the orchestra before. A test comes this fall when Hisaishi's music will be on the program without him at the podium. Still, Fleur said 15% of the new audience members he attracted returned for other concerts. Someone who came to one of my classical concerts once told me it felt almost like listening to rock music, Hisaishi said. I think that was because my approach is very rhythm driven, which makes the music more immediate and accessible. Perhaps that can become a point of connection, helping more people discover just how powerful an orchestra can be. If Hisaishi's film scores are guided by melody, then his concert works, which sound nothing like the soundtracks, are governed by rhythm. The effect can be exhilarating, as in his recent harp concerto, written for Emmanuel Sassanian and out this month on Deutsche Grammophon, but it can also be difficult. Hisaishi's Second Symphony lives or dies on rhythmic precision. It had the Philadelphia Orchestra audibly on edge last summer and took up most of his rehearsal time with the Chicago Symphony this spring. It is a battalion said with sigh, very demanding. In rehearsals, Hashishi is often gentle, stepping into podium in sneakers and relaxed outfit. He greeted the Chicagoans simply, "I'm so happy to be working with you today. Please enjoy my music." Although he could be demanding, he would often just ask the players to try a passage again, sometimes singing the correct articulation to them as guidance. Afterward, about 5 musicians approached him for selfies and autographs. One had even brought his family to meet him. Hashishi is not done conducting his film music. That Chicago concert ended with Spirited Away Suite and an encore from My Neighbor Totoro, and he has expanded into Western soundtracks such as A Big Bold Beautiful Journey last year. He also has more arena concerts planned, but more selectively at the Parrot called iconic venues like Red Rocks or the Arena di Verona. The real change in his life is how those appearances live in a more balanced way alongside his weeks at smaller stored halls. To him, there is no difference. I've always felt that I'm communicating directly with each person in an audience, sharing my message with them one by one. Hashishi said, "That's the mindset I always have, so whether there are 20,000 or 2,000 doesn't really make a difference to me. For me, it's always one-to-one." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in television. A new Little House updates the prairie. Netflix's adaptation empowers Ma and adds new Black and Native American characters. Winnipeg, Manitoba, standing in a chilly soundstage complex, here last fall, Georgian Weddles drifted into steamy Revere. Cameras had just stopped rolling on a Christmas Eve scene for Netflix's new adaptation of Little House on the Prairie. Weddles, a producer of the series, had stepped out of Stage C, home to full-scale log cabins surrounded by field of fox snow, and wandered into a nearby prop storage area. There she paused over an ornate rocking chair. In one episode, as in Laura Ingalls Wilder's classic book, Pa fashions a rocker from middle saplings for Ma, who is weak with fever. Imagine if your hot husband just threw this together. Whittles said with exaggerated relish, "A guy who can ride a horse and craft a gorgeous rocker and play the fiddle and build a log cabin." Then I ruined the moment with the question, why were we in Winnipeg? Was there no affordable prairie anywhere in America? Weddle sighed her expression, turning weary, even a little sad. Something about Little House on the Prairie always seemed to invite a cultural fight down to provinces of grass. Why couldn't people simply embrace the romance and ruggedness of the frontier the way she had moments earlier? Many viewers undoubtedly will. Now streaming on Netflix, this Little House on the Prairie lavishly evokes life in 1869 Kansas. If the old NBC series starred Michael Landon revealed in tidy moral lessons and homespun theatrics, the new adaptation favors versatile and natural splendor, moody sunsets, purple prairie clover, buzzing insects. Sunseams are almost slow cinema. Terrace Malick's Repertorious Days of Heaven, 1978, was the production team's touchstone. There was nothing but grass and waves of light and shadow and giant sky, Laura recalls, in an earnest voiceover in the first episode. In keeping with the 1935 children's novel, the third in Wilder's 9-book series, Charles and Caroline Ingalls and their daughters Laura and Mary climb into a covered wagon and leave Wisconsin for what was then called Indian Country. They encounter hardships, raging rivers, wildfire, land swindlers, wolves, as they pursue prosperity and room for breath. Wisconsin having become downright citified in Pa's estimation. But in a major departure, here the family's prejudices are challenged and ultimately vanquished by the people they meet, including a prominent Osage family and black proprietress of general store and George Tan, a successful black physician. I felt there was a real opportunity to unify, Weddle said. Let's make something intelligent and elegant that grandma to grandchildren from 8 to 80 would like to watch, to remind the world that we're better together. It's a nice thought, but Little House on the Prairies has long since evolved into a Rorschach test, something unto Americans project competing ideas about family, race, anxieties, what the country once was, or at least imagined itself to have been. One side sees wholesome reminiscence about faith, resilience, and bedrock American values, the other racist story about settler colonization. Even something as banal as bonnet, an easy way for rural women to shield themselves from the weather in the Wilder story, is no longer just a bonnet. In 2026, they've caught up in culture war debates over trade wives, recall for some of the head coverings in Handmaid's Tale. The show tried to deal with bonnet issue by using them sparingly and putting Caroline in a variety of accurate styles. Women wrote 6 of the 8 episodes and directed the entire first scene of Little House, which largely shifts the center of gravity from Pa to Ma. Caroline Ingalls, played by Crosby Fitzgerald, has the more substantial character arc. Starting out as a submissive wife and gradually coming into her own, she faces down predators with a rifle, saves her daughters from drowning, confronts a wealthy racist, and discovers what many her assumptions about the world were wrong. Ma has a total shift. Fitzgerald told me between takes. She learns that a lot of what she's been told, in particular about the Osage, are lies based on fear, greed. She's not just in the background baking pie, she added. Karen Graysel, who played Caroline, the NBC series, has long maintained that Landon pushed her character into background after Graysel asked her for a raise. Conversely, Charles Ingalls, played by Luke Bracey, strapped Australian, is written as playful and naive. He's a dreamer and she's a doer. Fitzgerald, said Bracey, standing after adjusting tightening boot, agreed. Our version of the story definitely demise the idea of self-made man, he said. In the Christmas Eve scene they just completed, for instance, Caroline insisted on financial reality as Charles indulged on fantasy. I'm not ready for them to stop believing in Christmas magic, Charles told her in a corner of the cabin, as Laura used to scrap a thread to string warm wool socks over a fireplace. I don't know how to make magic out of thin air, Caroline responded. The girls are old enough to know that money's tight. In another departure from the books and NBC series, the new Little House adds several Osage characters. They include Good Eagle, a foil to Laura played by Ren Zehin, her smart and cynical mother, White Sun, and her mixed heritage father, William Mitchell, a pacifist and successful farmer. For the Osage characters, Sunshine and wanted to craft a story that would give the insight into who they were and what they were going through, but not just as ideas, as people. The production employed a throng of ingenious cultural consultants and scholars to ensure authenticity and sensitivity. The changes may come as a surprise to the vast audience that still watches the NBC series and reruns last year. Little House generated 13 billion minutes of comfort viewing on streaming services like Peacock's and Amazon's Video, and another 6 billion on cable channels like Hallmark, according to Nielsen. Among the other differences, the deliciously awful Nellie Olson, a standout character in NBC series, does not appear in Netflix first season. She will arrive in season 2, which is already production and follows family in Minnesota. In Wink of Fans' 1974 show, spoiler alert, Allison Ingram, the original Nellie, pops up in the new adaptation as a creepy old woman in the woods. When I asked Sunshine if she felt any obligation to cater to the fans, she shook her head. Over in the props department, Weddle's chatting with show's lead to decorator James Vincent Kent, who credits stretch from The Last of Mohegans by the Gilded Age of HBO to get the period look of Little House just right, and production employed roughly 175 people in its art department, more than double the norm, according to Jonah Markowitz, the lead production designer. Customers tracked down the century-old death's head buttons. One 96,000-pound log cabin was constructed without nails and outdoor. Another was built inside Stage C. We really wanted to include items shown in the beloved Garth Williams illustrations from the book, Kent said. The hardest by far was rocking chair. Kent and Markowitz had almost given up when they met a woman selling antique brooms in a farmer's market near the set. They ended up hiring her to help make the chair. She spent days weaving it, Kent said. Can you believe your luck? Weddle's added, welcome to Winnipeg. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 12, 2026 issue of the New York Times Art and Leisure section. We read from the New York Times Art and Leisure section every Sunday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Harriet Gromer Hicks. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability